Hi everyone and welcome along. Can you believe we've made it to September? But that does mean a real change in theme around here. We're going to get to be doing some much more cozy crafts, and we're going to begin the month by painting this very sweet little fairy toadstool house. You're going to need some masking fluid for this one, but other than that, grab your paints and let's get. So it's going to be sweet and simple because I love painting little things. So I've got the shaft of the mushroom, and then we're going to do a slightly wobbly cap, and I thought I'd sort of bring it down a little bit of a wonky top, because then I can put in another mushroom for the chimney, and then I'll put a little window in the roof, and a window there, and then I'll have the door just a little off center. And then I think, just for sort of composition's sake, I might have a little low toadstool just to the side, and then a few little sort of grasses here, there, maybe some slightly taller ones. And that is it. So if you don't like drawing, remember you can just pause the video, use this as your screenshot to trace. And if you do like drawing, or if you want to try, then that's brilliant. And remember, excuse me, to roll your pencil lines with a kneadable eraser once you've drawn it, because you need to make sure that your pencil lines are lovely and faint. And then we are also going to do some masking fluid spots. So I've got a little bit of masking fluid here, and I've got a brush that I don't mind getting slightly ruined by masking fluid. And because it is a toadstool, we want to have those iconic white dots on the top of the mushroom. So I am just going to put those in masking fluid. I've painted, this is a fly agaric mushroom, is the official title, although I've never seen any with chimneys. And they have these lovely white, they're more like growths rather than spots, and they come in different sizes, the spots, and sort of formations, so keep a nice variation on your toadstool. And we're going to let that dry 100%. So just remember that your brush will get all clogged up with the gluey sort of liquid latex. So you need to make sure you've either got a specific applicator, like one of these. I don't know why I didn't use this, but I've just always had a brush I've sort of put to one side. But if this is a colour shaper by Royal Sovereign Limited, which is pretty good. It's got this silicone tip, which means it can withstand masking fluid, and a nice brush to sort of brush things away, but a normal paintbrush will do, and then you can just keep it to one side for masking fluid in future. So we're going to begin with some buff titanium, because we're going to paint the sort of paler areas, but I am going to get some raw sienna as well, a bit of buff titanium, but buff titanium's, oh no, sorry, burnt sienna, but it's a bit of a rich colour, so I just want to knock it back a bit with some moon glow. Moon glow feels a bit more earthy and appropriate for all of this, rather than Payne's grey. Of course Payne's grey will come in at some point, I am sure of it, but that slightly purpley feel feels good. Okay, so my masking fluid is pretty much dry, but I'm not painting onto it just yet. I'm going to begin with a size 2 brush and just painting in nice and pale on the shaft of the mushroom. And then I'm going to use some of these colours to do a bit of a wet on wet texture. Get those stripes coming up, and then maybe even just a little warmth. And then just a little bit more sort of shadowy tone around the top. It's quite fun to experiment with textures when you've got wet on wet, but what's important is to not overwork it. It'd be very easy to just keep on faffing about with that. But just let the watercolour settle in, do its thing, and it'll make some really fun textures and shapes whilst you're working on something else. Also, watercolour does lighten quite dramatically once it's dried, so even if you feel like you're putting in some really heavy colours, I can guarantee you they will look quite different when you come to the end. Okay, so we're going to just paint in the chimney. With the same kind of technique. And we're going to let those dry. I've now got some raw sienna, green gold and sap green in my palette, nice and dilute, and I am going to place in a little bit of the ground now that my mushrooms have dried a little. So using a nice large size 6 brush there to just place in that initial wash, and then now I can sort of create little patches with the green gold. And then I've got a size 0 brush. I've also got the rigger brush, which I'm going to use in a second. But what can be quite fun is popping in some grasses on the wet. It's one of my favourite things to do, actually. And we have got those taller ones which we'll wait to do, but I will just drop in a few little dabs of this sap green, sort of maybe make the suggestion that there's a bit of a path coming out from the Toadstool house. It's all about the order of things, sort of trying to decide what's drying, what can be painted. So now I'm going to do a little glow at the windows. So I've got some Hansa Yellow Medium. I've also got some Payne's Grey. So the way I'm going to do this, Hansa Yellow Medium, I'm going to paint that in on both windows. There's not too much liquid there. Try to be quite sparing with it. And then what I find, a glow always looks best if there's a little bit of shadow to contrast it, to make it look like maybe there's a little lamp or something in the room. You just got to be careful not to overdo it and overmix the bluey colour and the yellow colour and end up with green. Like, that's not very glowy at all. But what you could do is maybe just a few dabs of a little bit of orange in there. and we are getting there. So I think now it's time to pop the door in, and I think we'll do a nice rustic country wooden door, maybe like our own front door. Let's pop in a nice wooden door. So burnt sienna will be perfect for this, but whenever you have got one colour for a wood grain, you always want a few others, so just find some other earthy colours in your palette and your paintings will always be far more interesting and exciting because of it. So with my size 0 brush, I don't want too much liquid on it. So we're going to begin with some vertical stripes for planks on the door in burnt sienna, and I'm just very carefully leaving a tiny bit of unpainted space. Now you could absolutely go to town on the detail here. Mine is quite simple, but imagine all the things you could do. Ways to personalise this lovely little front door, or the house in general. So here I come with some moon glow. Got some raw umber here. That's looking nice. And now the moment we've all been waiting for, the red. So I've got some organic vermilion here, and it is sort of, I'd say, milk consistency. It's not that thick because what I want to be able to do is move it really easily, have good liquidity, and also be able to move it around the edge of the window. And you can see the masking fluid just resisting. It's going to be so fun when we can peel the whole thing off. So the amount of colour is starting to diminish on my brush, which is good. I want to have that sense of light and shade, just how I've done on the smaller mushrooms. So just allowing the colour to run out on my brush. And then I'm going to just take a much thicker, much more sort of cream-like consistency paint and bring it in kind of dab it in. I'm quite sort of keen on a bit of texture here. And maybe a little bit extra colour like around the mushroom chimney. That's looking nice. And then finally I've got some alizarin crimson, which I'm just going to drop in on the right hand side. And again, sort of quite happy to just create a bit of extra kind of texture with it. I don't necessarily want it all smooth. And actually on this bigger one, I'm just going to use it as a little bit of a shadow. I think that'll work really nicely. Oh, that's looking nice. So we're just going to let that dry. Oh, I did paint over my window thinking it was a toadstool, so I'll just blot that little bit there. And we can come up with something to save that, but we're just going to let that dry for now. So the good news is all you need to do if you paint over something is make sure it's still wet, and then you can just carefully blot it. And now I'll be able to just place in a little frame like I've done on the other window with some little bit of burnt sienna. And then I've just added a little Payne's grey knob on the door and a tiny bit of shadow to it all. And we'll add a little bit of sap green, deep sap green to the grasses. Just a few more here, there. And we want to do our longer grasses as well. So for that I'll get the rigger brush out, and actually I quite like the idea of getting a bit of the sort of golden brown colour in. And once everything is dry, we can rub off the masking fluid. So I'm now going to use my kneadable eraser to rub out the masking fluid. And also I can rub out the pencil at the same time. And that looks really cool. What I'm just going to demonstrate to you whilst I've got this one is I can just take a tiny bit of a sort of shadowy, like a warm shadowy colour. So like a creamy colour, and because these lumps do actually, they're lumps, they stand up, they're textures on the mushroom, so you can actually paint a little bit more depth into them and just layer with a glaze on top to just make the whole thing a bit more textured. And there you have your very own fairy toadstool house. So things to remember are, when you use masking fluid, you have to wait for it to dry naturally. Speeding it up with a heat gun can potentially result in it welding itself to the page and tearing the paper when you peel it off. So this is one to be patient with, but I really hope you enjoyed that one. I had a lovely time and it seems perfect as we move into September. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and of course if you want to support us, you can always become a YouTube channel member and part of my Alizarin Crimson crew and have your say in voting for a tutorial per month and your very special long form mini flower tutorials that only members and patrons get, and also a very special brand of hand painted emojis by me for you to comment with. Anyway, I will see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye.